Hi Year 8, welcome to your third history lesson of this sequence focusing on the First World War. It's Miss Cherry today, I hope you're all well. Our lesson title is What Was It Like to Live and Fight on the Western Front? So in order to be prepared for your lesson today, you will need to make sure that you have your history book, a pen, some scrap paper and also no distractions. You may want to press pause on the video now and make sure you've got yourself ready. So we're just going to have a little look at our knowledge recall quiz, focusing on last lesson when you learnt about who signed up to fight for Britain and why. So the first question is, when did the First World War start? Describe the Empire troops. Why did people want to join the army? How did the British Army encourage men to join the army? And when did the public believe the war would be over? Now would be a great time to pause and do these questions. So let's have a little look at our answers then. When did the First World War start? We know that it started in 1914 and ended in 1918. Describing the Empire troops. These soldiers were from Australia, India, Canada, New Zealand and the Caribbean. Now they were part of the empire which Britain had called on for support during the First World War. Why do people want to join the army? This was a time of patriotism, and so young men felt it was their duty to go and fight for their country. How did the British Army encourage men to join the army? The army promised that friends that enlisted together would serve together in a PALS battalion, and therefore encouraging them to go and stay together and create that feeling of comradeship. When did the public believe the war would be over? The message that was put out was that it would be over by Christmas. So it would be over in 4 months, and in actual fact it had taken 4 years. Now would be a great time to pause the PowerPoint and mark your answers. So just to recap, our lesson title today is What Was It Like to Live and Fight on the Western Front? And we have some key lesson objectives here that we want to be able to achieve by the end of the lesson. Firstly, identify the key features of a trench. Also know what daily life was like on the front line. And then explain what fighting was like on the front line. If you could have your knowledge organiser out, that would be great so that we can update the key vocabulary and events that will pop up in today's lesson. So you can see artillery there, very large guns moved on wheels. The front line, the area in which two armies face each other and fight. Stalemate, a situation in which neither side is winning. And then if we look at our events, 1915, poison gas could be fired from enemy guns. The 1st of July 1916, the infamous Battle of the Somme. Spring 1918, German troops tried one final time to break through on the Western Front. And then on the 11th of November 1918, fighting on the Western Front ended. So if we look at our starter for today, although the British and French and Belgian troops stopped the German army, they could not push them back, and this refers back to that word that we just mentioned of stalemate. And so therefore both sides were forced to build trenches. As you can see on your worksheet, there is a recreation of a trench. And we're going to try as best as we can and label it using the words that are provided. You've got 8 boxes here. First one, parapet, barbed wire, elbow rest, sandbags, the dugout, ammunition, shelf, fire step and duckboards. Now I know that you may not have looked at this before, but you could start with what you think you know and then go back to the ones that you're unsure of, okay, to fill those in. Now would be a great time to pause and write down your ideas. You can just write in the letter, of course, in the boxes and not the full word as they are quite small. Okay, let's go through our answers. So as you can see then on the top left, you've got your barbed wire. You've also got your parapet there. You've got the elbow rest for soldiers to lean on when they are firing against the enemy. Below, very handy, a little ammunition shelf. You've got a fire step, and you've also got some duck boards for the soldiers to stand and manoeuvre and walk through the trenches. And you will find out in a little second about why these duck boards were so important to prevent trench foot from constantly standing in the mud that was below the soldiers' feet. You can also see a little dugout there for when fighting temporarily ended. The soldiers could retreat in there in preparation for when it began again. And also some sandbags on the top right, which would try and take some of the impact from the enemy firing. So now would be a great time for you to press pause on the PowerPoint and write down the ones that you missed. Okay, let's get moving on to some new knowledge then about what it was like to live and fight on the Western Front. So as we've already mentioned, when the first volunteers headed for France and Belgium in autumn 1914, they were still expecting a short war. And the message that was put out was that it would be over by Christmas. A very reassuring message, but not quite the case. Trenches were used then to defend themselves and soon became permanent. As you can see in the map, the front line was from the North Sea to the Swiss border and stretched a huge 700 kilometres worth of land. You can also see the red star on your map there, and this shows where the Battle of the Somme was fought between July and November of 1916. Daily life for the majority of people, or for the majority of the soldiers, was extremely boring and uncomfortable. Lice and rats were known to cause soldiers misery. And you can see in this photograph here on the right hand side, soldiers being checked for trench foot. Okay. Trench foot was a condition from constantly being in these cold and wet conditions, and it was a deadly infection such as gangrene, and trench foot killed around 75 British soldiers between 1914 and 1918, a huge amount. Dangerous conditions from enemy artillery and the new threat of poisonous gas were also common features of fighting in the trenches. And you might notice in your workbook a picture of soldiers on their fronts with strange looking masks on. These are British soldiers wearing gas helmets dripped in anti-gas chemicals. And as you will read through this, you will find out that by 1916 they were replaced by gas masks which had respirators in them to purify the air. Soldiers at the time had to attack the enemy by going over the top, running through no man's land, which was the area between the British trench and the enemy trenches, filled with massive holes that had been left by the shells that had been dropped, filled with water, barbed wire, dead bodies from previous fighting. And it was extremely traumatic on these soldiers going over the top to try and seize the enemy trenches. The reason they were doing this was to try and take over the enemy trench and therefore push the enemy back and further into where they began. Okay. So our main activity then, activity 3.3, you can see that you need to write your own key terms in your own words for artillery, frontline and stalemate. And as you do these activities, you will need your 2 resource pages that you can see there on the left. Your second task here is describe what a soldier's daily life was like in the trenches. And then thirdly, you need to complete the table below to explain what fighting was like in the Western Front. Now you have 3 areas to focus on. What dangers were there on the front line? What was going over the top that we've just touched on? And why was the Battle of the Somme so tragic? Thank you for coming and listening to my lesson today. I hope that has been useful. Please make sure that we are happy to receive emails to your class teacher or via Show My Homework if you are stuck on anything. Okay, please get in touch and let us know.